Welcome to the Global Risk Podcast, brought to you by Solace Global. In this edition of Regional Flashpoints, our intelligence team highlights emerging security and political risks in key locations around the world. We begin in France, where widespread strike action and protests continue to draw large numbers across the country, adding further pressure to an already fragile political landscape. In the UK, large-scale demonstrations are exposing deepening divisions, as both pro-Palestine and far-right groups mobilise in London. We then move to the United States, where the assassination of a high-profile political figure has raised the risk of retaliatory action and wider political violence. Finally, we assess the fallout from the largest Russian drone incursion into NATO airspace since the start of the Ukraine war. Let's begin in France.
On the 8th of September 2025, the French government of Prime Minister François Bayrou collapsed after it lost a vote of confidence in the parliament. The collapse of the Bayrou government had been widely expected by French and international political commentators due to the Prime Minister's unpopular austerity policy plan. After the collapse of the Bayrou government, Macron quickly appointed a new Prime Minister, Sébastien Lecornu, who is considered to be a Macron loyalist. The collapse of the Bayrou government continues the political instability that France has suffered for more than a year now, with Lecornu being the fifth French Prime Minister that Macron has appointed since 2022. Despite the fall of the Bayrou government, there was a large-scale strike in France on the 10th of September. The strike, called Bloquons Tout, which literally translates to "let's block everything," saw more than 400 separate actions across France, with several blockades of main roadways, airports, and other transport hubs recorded. Another large-scale strike action under the same slogan is planned for the 18th of September. The strike underscores the severe political instability at the center of the French political system. Although the strike was not as disruptive as some predictions saw it, not reaching the same level of intensity as the Yellow Vests protests, further political instability is highly likely to occur. The main factor in determining this instability remains the next policy decisions taken by the new government. In particular, some unresolved issues over, for instance, the reform of the pension system remain highly contentious and will likely drive further similar unrest depending on what next steps the government takes.
Next, we turn to the UK, where the scale and tone of recent demonstrations highlight a growing political divide and potential for further unrest.
Several large-scale demonstrations occurred in London last week. First, a large-scale pro-Palestine demonstration was held during the visit of Israeli President Isaac Herzog. Herzog met with Prime Minister Keir Starmer and attended a series of high-profile political events. The demonstrations, which were organized by a consortium of pro-Palestine groups, did not result in any notable disruptions. However, they did draw significant crowds in Whitehall and other parts of central London. A second large-scale protest was held on Saturday. Under the Unite the Kingdom title, this protest was held by several right-wing and far-right political figures and saw the attendance of several political figures, political commentators and influencers, not only from the United Kingdom, but also from Europe and from North America. The protest drew more than 100,000 people and likely represent the largest scale far-right protests in British history so far. While London police successfully managed the protest, some isolated cases of clashes between protesters and counter-protesters were recorded, as well as disruptions when it comes to transport and services in central London. The protests come at a time of increased political tensions in the United Kingdom, which have the potential to draw further unrest as well as cases of political violence.
Now to the United States. A high-profile assassination has further inflamed tensions, sparking concern over copycat attacks and transatlantic repercussions.
On the 10th of September 2025, Charlie Kirk, a prominent right-wing American political speaker, was assassinated during an event at a university campus in Utah. The assassination comes at a time of increased political tensions in the United States, and it does follow several other high-profile assassinations or attempted assassinations targeting American politicians and political commentators. The most notable of these, obviously, being the 2 attempted assassinations on US President Donald Trump. The assassination, which involves an extremely high-profile individual who, although not holding any political office in the United States, was extremely politically influential due to his presence online and within the Republican Party, has the potential to drive further copycat actions and possibly retaliatory action, targeting politicians, political speakers, and other high visibility figures, not just in the US, but also in Europe. Indeed, due to the victim's high profile within the broader Anglosphere political debate online, the assassination has the potential to reverberate across the Atlantic in the United Kingdom and in other European countries.
Finally, we look at Ukraine and Poland, where a major drone incursion marks a turning point in NATO's posture on its eastern flank.
Overnight, on the 9th to the 10th of September, during a large-scale layered aerial wave of attacks conducted by Russian forces against Ukraine in the west of Ukraine, a reported at least 19 drones entered Polish airspace. This is an unprecedented Russian drone incursion into a NATO member state. During the incursion, at least 3 to 4 drones were intercepted by both Polish and NATO Air Command air defence efforts. In terms of direct kinetic impact, drone debris damaged the roof of a house in a village near the Ukrainian border, whilst the rest were either intercepted or crashed harmlessly. This did, however, lead to operations at several airports, including in Warsaw, being disrupted. Operations have now resumed. The Polish authorities have introduced flight restrictions along the eastern border with Belarus and Ukraine, which are in place until the 9th of December. In terms of the context of this incursion, there have previously been instances where Russian drones have entered Polish airspace, as well as other NATO members bordering Ukraine. In terms of Poland, there have been at least 6 previous incursions since the beginning of the 2022 full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russian forces. Previously, these were typically blamed on the use of electronic warfare by Ukrainian forces. These have proven to be highly effective at jamming and disrupting incoming drones targeting Ukrainian cities, and has led to them going off course. However, these deviations in these previous instances were typically localized, and it involved a small number of drones. The drone incursion that took place overnight, 9 to 10 September, is markedly different. This is by far the largest incursion so far, and approximately triples the total number of projectiles which have fallen in Poland since 2022. Secondly, this is the first time that NATO force air defence efforts have directly intercepted Russian aerial threats since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Ultimately, the incursion led to the Polish military command calling the incident an act of aggression, and the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, telling Parliament that it's the closest Poland has been to open conflict since World War II, although he did stress that there was no reason to believe that Poland is on the brink of war. Article 4 of the NATO Treaty, which brings an urgent issue to the North Atlantic Council, was invoked. It is highly unlikely that Article 5, which stipulates that NATO members will collectively respond to an armed attack when a NATO member, will be invoked. However, Article 4 has only been invoked 8 times since NATO's establishment in 1949, with the most recently being invoked by Poland and other Eastern European nations at the beginning of the 2022 full-scale invasion. In terms of intentionality, it is highly likely that the drone incursion was intentional by Russian forces. There are several reasons for this that include the scale, the coordination, and the chosen platforms for the incursion. Notably, none of the drones that incurred into Polish airspace were weaponized with warheads. These platforms were likely intentionally chosen to minimize the risk of severe escalation. In terms of the reasons why Russian forces would conduct such an incursion, this is threefold. Firstly, it allows the Kremlin to test the NATO resolve and response to Russian aggression. Secondly, it allows Russian forces to test NATO defensive capabilities and response times to Russian platforms. And thirdly, it deters support for Ukraine. This drone incursion happens within the context of the 2025 Zapad war games held by Russia and Belarus, which are set to run between the 12th and the 16th of October, and manoeuvres taking place close to Poland and Lithuania. It is almost certain that NATO's posture in Eastern Europe will harden as a result of the incursion, and it is likely that tensions are the highest at NATO's border with Russia since the beginning of the 2022 full-scale invasion. In terms of how the threat can develop, the drone incursion may mark an escalation in Moscow's tactics, techniques and procedures, or TTPs, in its long-running campaign of operations against NATO member states, which have typically been designed to be sub-threshold. Already, we have seen Romania claim that Russian drone incurred into their airspace since the Polish drone incursion. If these incursions become a sustained TTP for Russian forces, this will increase the risk of miscalculation and escalation.
That concludes this episode of Regional Flashpoints on the Global Risk Podcast. These updates form part of our Global Intelligence subscription, which includes weekly reports, in-depth briefings, and live Q&A sessions with our experts. To learn more, visit solisglobal.com. Thank you for listening.